Good morning. How are you today? Yeah. So I'm aware of the time now is 9:48. We were supposed to start at 9:30, but it's not because of our fault, because of the door. You see, the door was not open at that time. So that is okay. But I'm informed that you have another lecture at 10:30. 10:45. Ah, okay. So it's okay. So we will not have 1 hour because afterwards, you will bring me to the airport. I have a flight to Kunming at 14:10. To Kunming, and I know that some of you are from Kunming. I'm very glad to meet Kunming people here. But not only Kunming, you have many people. So yes, as my friend said, I'm Hùng Nguyen from International Livestock Research Institute, INRI. I'm originally from Vietnam, so not far from here. So I was very close to I'm close to Kunming, to Guangxi. But actually, I'm working in Kenya, in Africa, for the last 5 years. And it's really an absolute pleasure for me to be here in Shanghai for the first time. And I would like to thank my colleague, friend, Professor Zhou, for inviting me to the workshop. It took place for the last 2 days, so I met some of you there. And yes, it's also a good opportunity to come here to share with you some of the research that I have been doing with colleagues for the last 10 or 15 years in the areas of food safety and One Health. If you check in the program, I think that initially he put me to talk something about zoonotic diseases control, and I said that okay, I could talk about that, but maybe it's easier for me to recycle some of the research and slide to share with you the research on food safety because it was a bit in the short notice. So it's very nice to be here. Okay, so I want to know a bit about background of this group because I know that you have been here for a week for this summer school. So I understand that you are a student or a professional. So let's raise hand, how many people are master students here in this room? Oh, quite a bit, half of them, you. Okay, thank you very much. Who are PhD students? A bit less? Okay, thank you very much. And if you are not PhD and master student, who are you? What are you doing? I know that now she's a postdoc, if you are not PhD and master student, raise your hand. 1, 2. What are you doing?
I'm an undergrad student.
Undergrad student. So the question is, who are undergrad students?
She's undergrad too.
Okay, so 2 of you.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so only undergrad, master, and PhD student. Very nice. Okay. So who are medical doctor? Oh, we have a few. I know that I'm from Pakistan, from Myanmar. Where are you from? Nepal as well. Okay. Who are in medicals or biology, life science? Okay, great. Who are from Shanghai? Only one. Who are from Shanghai? Oh, really? Okay, interesting. Who are from Kunming? Where are the flag? I saw that you took a photo with Tanawat. Okay. Who are from Guangzhou? I know that my friend francophone. You are from Guangzhou. Where are you from?
Duke in the U.S.
Duke, U.S. Not Kushan. Duke Kushan here.
No.
Okay. I heard that you have a university here. Okay, great, excellent. You are from Mongolia, from China, etc. There one seat here. Come, sit here. Come here. I want you to come here to the table. Okay. So yes, how do I manage with my slide? How to change the slide? Okay, so I think that this is very nice. I think that this is okay. I know the background, and we are in the hospital here. We are not at university. It's also interesting because I'm not a medical doctor either. I'm a biologist. So yes, a few words about me. He already said. So this is I put this meeting because some of you saw him yesterday. Tanawat Tinsian, he's Assistant Director General of FAO. And Emmanuel Soubegon, she's DG of VOHA, World Organization of Animal Health, OMSA in French. So this photo, we took this photo last month or 2 months ago in Paris when VOHA have general session, and we talked about One Health and animal health control on that. Okay, so I'm from Vietnam, as I said. I studied in Vietnam and in France, and afterwards I worked with Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute. Many Swiss colleagues was there yesterday. We met there during that time. And I moved back to Vietnam to work at Hanoi University of Public Health, where we develop eco-health and One Health research. That's why, when we will come back to One Health later, but in 20 years ago, we had many projects in Southeast Asia and China on eco-health. And Professor Zhou was one of the PI of eco-health project funded by Canada. And Professor Fang Jing from Kunming Medical University, who was in our group to develop this approach regionally. And afterwards, I moved to INRI, International Livestock Research Institute, for the last few years to lead the health program over there. And working on, I have been leading a research group over there in Africa. And actually, my areas, I'm biologist, microbiologist by training, and my area is about food safety, but very much promoting One Health for zoonotic diseases, AMR, food safety, and so on. We also did capacity building work, etc. Okay, so so this is a slide I didn't show yesterday. So by the way, how many people was there yesterday at the workshop? Yeah, now there's a One Health workshop in Pullman Hotel for the last 2 days. On Friday and Saturday. I think that some of you were invited, but not everyone was there, right? Okay, yeah, I saw some of you, but not all. The room was quite small. I saw you sit on the back. Okay, so that was an interesting meeting. I think that that is the third time Professor Zhou organized, convening different experts of One Health. It's a very international group to talk about agenda and so different things. Okay, so I show this slide because that is the strategy of One Health. We are working at INRI at my institute. Okay, so she mentioned already. In 70s, 1970s, about that time, the food insecurity was a huge problem. Many countries in the developing country, now they call low and middle income country. The world is very much divided. We have all these rich countries, US, Europe, Canada, etc. In Southeast Asia, we have Singapore, or Japan or Korea. They are in the kind of developed country, and the rest now, by classification, they are developing country or low and middle income countries. China, I think that is now is a low middle income country, low middle income country. It's not developed country yet. Even they are very big, and so on. So in 70s, which was many countries, had a big issue of poverty and food insecurity. People didn't have enough to eat. Basically, this issue. It is still now the problem in Africa, South Asia, and some other places. But in 70s, it was very difficult. So the Rockefeller Foundation founded the CGIA or some center, research center like Rice Research Institute, IRI. Anyone from the Philippines? No? So in Philippines, we have International Rice Research Institute, established in 70s. In Peru, they have Center Research, International Research for Potatoes. In Mexico, they have the CIMIT, International Center for Maize and Wheat Research. So all these research centers work to improve the productivity. You need to produce more to have more food for people. Okay? So altogether, we have 15 centers. And I work for a center called INRI. It's about livestock, International Livestock Research Institute. So we want to help farmers from the poor country to raise their productivity in livestock to produce more protein. Okay? Protein, animal source food, milk, meat, egg is very important because it provides, a very vital element for development for children in particular. For the first 1,000 years, if children don't have enough protein, so there will be a big implication on intelligence and capacity for the whole life. That's why we need to have a quite diversified and good diet for that. So that is history of the different centers. So now on this center have 50 years, about on these centers, 50 years. INRI, my organization, celebrated 50 years last year. And of course, the world has changed, Now many countries, they have too much to eat, right? In the global north. I said yesterday that in the US, per capita, they consume more than 100 kilograms of meat per person per year. It is on average in the US. In Africa, of course, it's much poorer. Anyone from Nigeria here? No Nigerian? You are from Burundi. I don't know what's the consumption over there. Nigeria is the biggest population in Africa, and each person on average consumes less than 10 kilograms of meat per year compared to over 100 kilograms from Europe and North America. So you have a big gap in inequality in animal source food consumption. So whatever people talked about in the US or in France, in Spain, people eat too much meat. That is not necessarily the problem of Africa and some other country. So people talked about climate change, etc. You should not eat too much red meat because cattle emits a lot of gas affecting climate change. But if you only talk in that direction, it means that you will prevent the consumption of people in the country where you don't have enough to eat. You see what I mean? So the political decision on meat consumption need to be tailored to the need of different countries. So you cannot say that in the US you eat too much, we need to reduce. But people in Vietnam or in Kenya, they don't have enough to eat for that. Okay, so coming back to this one is the strategy of One Health. It's not really new for some of you, I believe. But actually I am also part of this group. I said yesterday. OLAP, One Health High Level Expert Panel. So we talked about, good morning, we talked about the quadripartite organization, and now we are sitting here in the hospital. We know very well World Health Organization, WHO, okay? So that is one organization. The second organization is the FAO. So I show Tanawat, he is the Assistant Director General of FAO in Rome, okay? So that is second organization. The third organization is the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. So headquarters in Nairobi, okay? And the fourth one is World Organization for Animal Health. So Emmanuel, she is the DG at the moment. So four organizations, they call quadripartite organization. So they get together to promote the One Health approach, okay? The One Health approach. Basically, that is an approach, it's not a methodology. It's an approach to bring people to work together, to optimize and balance the health of people, animals, and the environment or the ecosystems. So when we talk about One Health, it means that you need to see the intersection of the health of people, animal, and the ecosystem. If you talk about health of people alone, so it's not about One Health. So that's why this organization, they convene a group of experts. I think that we have 29 people globally to develop different things on One Health and to advise these four organizations how to move forward scientifically with this approach. And that's why in our group yesterday there are 4 people in that group. It is Professor Zhou, that you know. There's Professor Fang Jing from Kunming Medical University. There's Serge Moran, he's a French, working for French research organization CNRS, but he's based in Thailand. And myself, I'm based in Kenya. So it is a bit the gathering of this group together. So because I'm talking about One Health, so that group, we promote this approach. And for my own institute, in each institute you need to develop your strategy for that. So we develop a One Health strategy. And actually we work from the livestock sector. So the One Health we are talking about is very much linked to animal health. But going into the framework of One Health, that's why we need medical doctors like you and environmental people to work together. And for that, we do a lot of research. We transfer it into the policy. I gave a talk yesterday, if for some of you who was there, how to translate research into policy, but also develop the institutional capacity to implement the One Health approach in different levels. It means that at the country level, in Myanmar and Bangladesh, in India, they have the so-called national platform of One Health. They bring Ministry of Health, Agriculture, Environment together to work. So that is the country level. But you need also to bring that expertise of One Health at the provincial level and local level. Because like Tanawat said, the problem coming from the ground. So the local authority have to recognize this, make priority and invest money to solve the problem. Or, if you move up to the regional level, so in Asia here, for example, some of us are part of the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Economies. I think that is 12 countries now: Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. It's equivalent to the SACs, I think in the South Asia, you have another association. So these people also need to work together to solve problem at the regional level, and of course up to the global level, you have the quadripartite. So this is a bit the connection. And for that, we work on the key issue on epidemics and pandemics. So COVID issue, for example, is one of the things we are working on. The food safety, so I'm talking a bit today, but also other important areas is antimicrobial resistance. I believe that our colleague from Bangladesh gave a lecture yesterday or before yesterday to you. Dr. Tanvir, he talked about that. So in my institute, we have different projects on One Health. So mostly in Africa, but some also in Asia. So for example, we have the One Health Center in Africa. We have the COHESA project, capacitating One Health in Eastern and Southern Africa, and so on. In Vietnam, we have a Safe Pork project funded by Australia. Anyone from Australia here? No? We have APAT, another project improving food safety in India, in Assam area. Okay, so who else from Asia? Yes, so we have another project on ICT, developing app to do disease surveillance in Vietnam. We call ICT for Health, funded by Korea. Anyone from Korea? Not in this group? And so on. You might recognize also DITRA. DITRA is a donor from the US, working mostly on the army, and they fund also some of the project in infection and so on. So this is the project, different project we are having. Okay, now I come back to the food safety issue. And the food safety, we are working in our institute is really work on food safety in traditional and informal market. Okay, so why we are working on traditional and informal market? So I want to ask you here, let's make it a bit interactive. What is the traditional market or informal markets for you? Anyone can tell me?
Like the open market where people can live, or everyone can go and buy food or visitors.
Okay, it's open market. What else? Any other idea? And why is some important? Fresh market. Yeah, I had a walk this morning around the hotel, and I enter the supermarket in the center of Shanghai, and they have fresh food, fresh meat, fresh seafood, fresh vegetable, but it's very well organized. It's not open, it's inside the supermarket. Okay, so the reason we talked about the traditional and informal market, because this is very popular in developing countries. Okay, if you go to the rich country, so when you want to buy something, you need to go to supermarket or convenience shop. Everything is closed, regulated, etc. Okay, you still have traditional market in Europe from time to time, but very small, and probably they will open only during the weekend. Where are you from? Sorry, I asked again.
The US.
The US. So I don't know much about the US. So I was in Europe. So in Paris, for example, every Sunday or Saturday, you still go to a corner. Farmer comes, they sell the fresh food. But it's not happening another day in the week. You need to go to convenience. Okay. But in developing countries, about, I would say, 80 to 90% of food are from the traditional market. Okay. I prefer the term of traditional market because it's very traditional. In Africa, they call informal market. Informal means you can find food and you can buy everywhere. And mostly the local authorities, they cannot control it because they don't have capacity. That's why it's informal. And also because of informal, because people, the government or authority cannot control it, and they cannot collect tax from these people. Right? They can pop up everywhere. So that's why they call informal. in Vietnam, where I come from, for example, it's not informal. You cannot really sell food everywhere. A little bit here and there, but it's not big portion of the market. They have open market, but even the open markets, the government control, and they actually tax people come. However, compared to supermarket, it's very different because, they have very poor infrastructure. Sometimes they don't have water. The hygiene practice is not very, very good. And, this poses problem of food safety. Okay, that's why we care about the food safety of traditional market. Okay, so here I put a few things you need to see. You are very right. It's open. People come to buy fresh food, and that is important for many people, low income people, even high income people. By convenience, people come also to buy this food in this place. Okay, and there are some issues like poor infrastructure, poor hygiene, etc. for that. That have an idea about the informal market and a smallholder. What is a smallholder? A livestock production. Here we have talked about meat, milk, and egg. That is mostly the animal source food from livestock. Of course, if you work in aquaculture, you have a lot of fish. I know that South Asian people, you eat a lot of fish as well. So that is important. But here I'm talking about livestock. You see, in East Africa, about 80% or to 90% of meat and milk are produced by the smallholder livestock. Anyone from Thailand? No? Thailand, they have the big livestock company CP. They produce a lot of meat, and that is actually commercial scale. They have 1,000 pigs, etc., like in China, for example. But the typical pig production in Vietnam is about 10 to 50 pigs per farm and owned by the family. So that is a smallholder. If you have a big farm of 1,000, 2,000 pigs, it's not smallholder anymore. It's a commercial scale. Okay? So in Kenya, for example, one cow, they produce something like 4 liters, 2 to 4 liters per day. Whereas for the same cow in the Netherlands and in France or in the US, they can produce about 30 to 40 liters. 10 times more than Africa. The gap of productivity is very big. Nevertheless, they represent 80 to 90% of the food produced in this country. India is the number one of dairy production in the world because you guys big, but the productivity is not there. So you see, many Bangladeshi people here, I think that the beef 65%, chicken 77%, milk 65%. You see, and India is even bigger here, and so on. And Thailand, Vietnam, where people eat a lot of pork, 80% of pork in Vietnam are produced by smallholder, from 10 or from 1 to 50 pigs. Imagine, so it's if you think about the importance, this is very important for food security. Okay, now from a public health point of view, people don't like much informal market or traditional market because they want to improve the quality of the market, improve the hygiene practice, they want to improve the infrastructure. But the governments don't have enough money to upgrade and improve on this market. So what do? You cannot close on this informal market. If you close, people don't have the place to buy food, but also people who sell food, that is the source for them to generate the income, right? So the question is not to close the informal market or traditional market. The question here is how to improve it before the country develop, and one day they will have own this supermarket like in developed countries. So another thing in Southeast Asia context, people talked a lot about this thing, live birth market. So that is also very typical in Southeast Asia, China, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar. So this thing exists. You see, and of course now we have a lot of issue with if influenza, for example, we need to control it well. So that's why I see that the interest of One Health is really the medical people, the public health people. They want to put a lot of measurement, regulation, etc. But it's another side, from agriculture side and from the population side, you cannot close on this thing, and we cannot really improve it very quickly. Okay, why we have to work on food safety? food is very important. Like air, we need to eat every day, and actually, but we don't really know what is the problem of food safety until 10 years ago. 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, WHO published the global burden of foodborne diseases. Here you have medical people. You understand about the DALI? Huh? So I believe. So in terms of DALI, it's about 41 million loss per year. Okay, so this is equivalent around, the same for HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. These three big infectious diseases. Okay, and food safety altogether, foodborne diseases, give almost similar the burden of public health. But the investment, the intervention at the global level to solve the foodborne diseases is very small. It's nothing comparable with global fund paying money to control HIV/AIDS, malaria, and TB. Okay, so this is very, very important. And in terms of money, and that is very important because we talked about health. Sometimes when we do a PhD or we study, etc., we focus so much in a very in-depth discipline, and that is very important. We need expert. But in terms of decision making, people talked about money. When you talked about projects, the Minister of Finance, etc., when they control, they talked about money. Okay, so I showed yesterday also the economic loss caused by foodborne diseases. Welcome, Maria. Welcome. Good to see you again. Maria, welcome. Can you introduce yourself? Because I think that I will ask you some questions. This audience is very important.
Okay, I am Dr. Maria Guzman from the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Havana, Cuba, far away from here, maybe, and I am virologist.
I stay close to you so that they can capture the sound.
Okay, and very nice to be here today. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. I totally, yeah. No, Professor Zhou is very powerful. He invited many people from different corners of the world. Cuba, Kenya, Thailand, Vietnam, every country coming here for the workshop. Okay, so each year, the foodborne diseases cost about 115 billion US dollar. That's the big money. I don't know, you see the scale. So if you solve this problem, you can save 115 billion US dollar globally. However, like I said, food safety is a little bit like smallholder and informal market. It's mostly happening in developing countries. I think that on this allocation of the loss of economics, mostly from country from low and middle income country. You see China, you see India, so maybe it's small for you. I can share the slide with you. Okay, and only very small, a tiny portion of loss in terms of health and economy in the same time are from developed countries. So if you want to solve the problem of food safety in terms of health and in terms of economy, you focus on low and middle income countries because most of the problem come from there. You see, and another thing I want to emphasize, this is about the public perception. When we talked about food safety and so on, people are very scared about pesticide. They are scared about heavy metal, etc., because it causes cancer, which is true. However, for the best knowledge so far at the moment, the big, the main causes of burden of foodborne diseases are caused by microbial pathogens. Virus, parasite, bacteria, mostly bacteria. Okay, and the toxin, for example, here from chemical side is very small, based on the evidence we are having so far. So, if you target more the control on reduction of bacteria or viral infection, contamination of food, that will be much more efficient compared to controlling the chemicals hazard. And the best way, of course, you need to do both, right? You need to have regulation to reduce microbial contamination, to reduce chemical, pesticide, residue, etc. altogether. But in terms of priority, if you want to target the best effective public health intervention, the best evidence shows that you need to target on where the risk is high. Okay, so that is the global issue. So here I mentioned a bit about One Health already. I think that Not everyone was in the room yesterday and before yesterday. But now, these 4 organizations I explained from the beginning, the quadripartite, WHO, FAO, UNEP, VOA, they develop a global agenda to implement One Health, and they call it One Health Joint Plan of Action between 22 to 26. And to implement that plan, they define 6 track or action track. And fortunately, food safety is one of the track that global level want to prioritize and implement it. You know, you have here strengthening and assessment, management, and communication of food safety risk is exactly what we are talking about. And in addition to that, of course, Maria, she talked a lot about virus, for example, so that will belong somewhere here, reducing the risk from emerging and re-emerging zoonotic epidemics and pandemics. You have the so-called neglected tropical diseases and vector-borne diseases here. You have AMR, of course, antimicrobial resistance. You have the capacity, enhancing capacity for strengthened health system, and also how to integrating environment as a key component of One Health. So who are studying environmental science here? Okay, you have colleagues from the US, only 1 person. So the rest is more medical. So and any vet in this room, veterinarian. Anyone? Oh, we have 1. Animal science. Okay. So very few animal science, and in environmental, you are more medical. This is very important because we are sitting here in the hospital. We need doctors and medical people. Are you a medical doctor, Maria? Yeah. You are? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I'd like to tell you what is the, how much is the level of contamination we have in our food. You see here, some study from here, for example, I have a PhD student from Cambodia, Rotana Che. He went to the traditional market, open market, everywhere in Phnom Penh, in different provinces. He collected samples, okay, and he found that, for example, here you have chicken. He also took swab samples from the cutting board. In every market in Southeast Asia, people bring in chop, and they give to you. You pay, right? So we want to know what is the level of contamination on the cutting board for chicken. We do the same for pork, okay? So in Vietnam, Cambodia, we eat a lot of pork. By the way, the level of consumption of pork, Vietnam per capita, they eat something like 28 kilograms of pork per capita, okay? I think China is much more. China is over 30 kilograms. For an African, in Kenya and Uganda, over there they eat more beef. The average consumption of Ugandans is about 4 kilograms of pork a year. Also because they don't produce enough pork at the moment in that continent. Okay, so Maria says that in the rich country, the US, they eat more than 100 kilograms of meat per capita. In Nigeria, they eat less than 10 kilograms of meat, so it's a big gap and inequality over there. Okay, coming back to this level of contamination. Salmonella is a top pathogen bacteria in food safety. Okay, chicken 38%, I know 20% the prevalence. Pork is about 17%, the prevalence of Salmonella. And when, of course, you show this result to the US or Europe, it's impossible to allow that. When you go somewhere in a supermarket in US and France, for example, the prevalence should be 0 or 1 or maximum 5. It's about that range. And 20%, 17% in here in Salmonella. Number positive bottom. Sorry, I mixed the columns here. Salmonella alone is 45%. Okay, in chicken. Pork 45%, cutting board 41%, 30%. It's huge. We did the same study in Vietnam. We found a little bit similar. Even it go to 40, 50%. And when we presented it to the people from public health, they didn't want to hear from you. But that's the reality. The policymakers, sometimes they try to actually understand the way from different perspectives. we researchers and scientists, we collect data, we present data, but depending on how you present, you will receive different type of reaction. When you go out to present at a conference, of course, we talked about One Health Index in another room. If someone from Myanmar or from Nepal, I think, our colleague from Nepal, the index of One Health index produced by Shanghai, Nepal is really low in the bottom. And of course, the reaction, why is so low? And our Swiss colleague, very proud when you see that we are number one on zoonotic disease control, and our colleague from Jessica from Brazil, number one in food safety. So this is actually the kind of natural reaction from a nation perspective. And at the same time, from the management perspective, for example, I presented to people from Ministry of Health that Vietnam have very high prevalence of Salmonella, about 50% in informal market. It is not good because they are the managers. They want to make things better. But unfortunately, that is the reality. We need to look at the truth. And only when you accept the truth, you find a solution to improve the situation. So what I want to say here is, in fact, it's nothing new. It's nothing shocking when you see the high contamination of Salmonella in pork, in chicken, in traditional market in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. I suppose that it may be similar for many other countries, and we found the same in Africa. Okay, and of course, with that, if you transfer the level of contamination to the health impact, so that is a hazard-based approach. You collect information, you analyze, you know the level of contamination. But when you go further, one more step to do risk assessment, you will have an idea about how many people get sick by eating this contaminated food. Okay, so this is the level of contamination. Okay, we did risk assessment. I don't go to the detail here. Okay, so we did a risk assessment here, and we cost also the we did cost of illness study from Cambodian system. We collect data, when people get diarrhea, for instance, they go to different hospitals from the low of provincial level or national level, how much they have to pay, and how many people in the family have to take care of them. During the time they got sick, they cannot work, so they lost also the livelihood, the income, etc. We process in different modeling with health economist people. And here shows us that the cost of illness of foodborne diarrhea was about $63 per case for Cambodian system. Okay, in Vietnam it raised up to $100 or $115. And of course, if you know the number of cases of foodborne diseases in Kenya, in Cambodia, and you know how much it costs per case, you can easily convert in terms of economic loss, and that comes back to the number I showed you before. 115 billion globally lost per year from foodborne diseases, coming from the data if you process it at different levels. And when you bring this figure to show to the Minister of Health, Minister of Finance, and you make the option for them, if you want to control these foodborne diseases, how much you can save money for the country, and so on. I think that I have about 10 minutes more before you have another lecture. So it's Maria, you continue, or someone else? You are, so 10:45, okay?
If they are not tired.
No, I'm not tired, but I have to go to the airport. Yeah. Okay, so we do similar things in Vietnam. You see, here's the number small, but when you look at all these things, it's so very similar trend of contamination and so on. So that's a different study we did. Now, the risk assessment. I said that, in food safety, so far people care a lot about the contamination level. But when you have a high level of contamination, it does not necessarily, lead to a very severe health impact if you know how to manage it. Vietnamese people, they eat a lot of pork. The Salmonella contamination is 50%, 55% in when samples. But most of Vietnamese, they cook very well. You cook high temperature, you cook well. So in theory, most of the bacteria on pork, the contaminated Salmonella will be killed during the cooking process. So the food you eat at the end on the table, is basically safe for consumption. Okay? The problem is, in fact, if you don't cook when, you eat raw or undercooked. So for that case, you have the problem. The second area is, in fact, when you have a very contaminated pork in the kitchen, if you don't separate when the raw meat with a lot of salmonella, it will mix it with the salad or whatever you want to eat raw. So that you will have the big problem. That's why you need to manage when at the household level, and that is another area. You collect sample from the market, but you need to work also at the household level, and that is a risk assessment will allow you to quantify the risk that consumer have at the end by eating pork that was contaminated by salmonella. And so we do all this risk assessment modeling, etc. And in Vietnam, we found that basically here's the estimated annual salmonellosis incidence in Vietnam by different communities. So on average, about 17% of people per year got sick by eating the pork that was contaminated from traditional market. And we found that it's not about the cooking that causes problem. That is about cross-contamination. When people use the same cutting board, the same knife, or they don't wash nicely, etc. So salmonella from the contaminated pork will infect and contaminate other foods that they are eating. But so if you solve that problem, the risk will be very low and minimal. And when we convert that risk in terms of health to money, so in Cambodia, you remember it's about $65 diarrhea case on management. And in Vietnam, it got something like $107. This cost varies from the economic level. The cost we pay in Cambodia are not the same in Vietnam when you go to hospital. That's why it's more expensive here. And actually, you can convert how much US dollar that cost, and it represents something like 0.8 GDP. It's a huge money for the country if you can control it. For the country like Vietnam, for example. Okay, so contamination, health risk, economic risk is very important to have this overview for control the disease. So Maria saw this yesterday. For those who are not familiar for some of the context, this is the so-called pork value chain in traditional market in many countries in Southeast Asia. At the beginning, I talked about the smallholder. In Vietnam, if you have one pig to 50 pigs, that is smallholder. If you have 200 to 1,000, you have commercial scale. Pigs is produced in a smallholder. It goes to the slaughterhouse, and traditionally, pork pigs, slaughter on the ground, so it causes a lot of contamination. Okay, when it goes to the open market, you mentioned that everything is open, hygiene is not good, infrastructure is poor. When they transport the carcass, I hope that you can see it. Many Vietnamese people put carcass on the motorbike, go from the slaughterhouse to the market. Okay, so of course, during the transportation, contamination can happen here. Here's a vegetable, and actually here on the table, and cook after all these chopping things I mentioned. So that's why we say that from farm to chopstick, because that's a chopstick used country. When you see the context in Africa, for example, here in Uganda, it looks very similar. Uganda is very far from here. Small holder pigs, slaughtering, a lot of processing in slaughterhouse. Here a little bit better. They put in the small truck, but nothing covered, etc. Here, in the shop. In Africa, it's very interesting. The East Africa was colonized by the UK, by British people, and they are keeping some of the structure from British people. So I don't know how it works in the country Burundi, but in Vietnam you don't have this butcher like this. Everything on the table and also supermarket. And here you still have a corner with a hung meat, etc. It's a little bit like Europe, but a different version with poor infrastructure and hygiene and so on. And in Kenya, for example, that is they call nyama choma. It's basically barbecue. People do a lot of barbecue through this meat, etc. Okay, so the approach that we are having, I mentioned, and now I want to summarize it. Is in fact, when you work on food safety in traditional market, for our experience, we use the so-called risk-based approach. Okay, we have the risk analysis framework. very much promoted by the Codex. Codex is an organization between WTO, WHO, and FAO. And this component have risk assessment. This basically the scientific work of us, of you, of many people, sampling, analyzing, modeling to know the information. This basically scientific work, risk assessment. During risk assessment, you need to have the risk communication to engage with public, to inform people how many people might get sick, how the food is contaminated. And at the end of the day, you need to have people to manage the risk. They call risk management. And in many cases, of course, that is the job of the government and local authority to manage it, mostly from public health side or agriculture side. But if you think about the risk assessment from the household level, in Vietnam, for example, most of the meal in the family are prepared by women. Women, they go to the market, they buy pork, they bring home, they put in the fridge, they chop, they cook, and they offer it to most of the members of the family. So from a risk management point of view in food safety, this women is the risk manager. If that women have a good knowledge, good practice to buy pork, process pork, prepare and offer to everyone, she can help to reduce a lot of risk in terms of foodborne disease for the family. So the risk manager is not about the policymakers, the minister of health, it's also people in the family, in the community. That's why every year we have the 7th of June for the last few years. That is the World Food Safety Day. And the logo, the logo and how to say is the motto of Food Safety Day is, and food safety is the business of everyone. It is the business of the Minister of Health, Agriculture, but also your business, my wife's business at home to prepare safe food for everyone. So food safety, business of everyone. This is the short motto of Food Safety Day, 7th of June every day. Remember that date, okay? So that is about risk-based approach. However, the tricky thing of risk assessment is, in fact, you need to have a lot of data, okay? And it's a rich country, I suppose that Cuba, Maria has a lot of data, I suppose. But in many low and middle income countries, because you don't have a lot of scientific study, etc., the data are very scarce, okay? And when you do risk assessment, how do you do in this, a scarcity of data? So INRI, together with partners, develop an approach for risk assessment for low and middle income country. So you can use a participatory approach instead of taking a lot of samples, doing a lot of survey. You can convene experts doing focus group discussion to ask information based on the knowledge and perception of the expert in the area. So in that way, of course, the information is not so precise. Like you go to the market or do a survey, it takes months to get data, but you have an essential, minimum essential information to fit on the data. During the workshop, I like very much the way of Zinger, the director of CTPH, and Professor Zhou, when he talked about One Health Index, they come up with 130 indicators or something. But do we really need 130 indicators to decide something? Or we need, less than that, but essential. It represents essential, minimum but essential information to make decision. We can always do something with information we have. So we generate the hazards and risks like I presented before. But more importantly, when you know the problem, you need to reduce. You need to make new intervention, innovation to reduce all these things. And of course, when you have the interventions that work, you need to multiply it or scale up to reach many people. And now I just want to show you what we are doing in terms of intervention. Okay, I skip this one. Okay, I show here a very simple intervention we are doing in Vietnam and Cambodia. You remember that? If you don't see it very clearly, I try to explain it. And I'm sorry for the religion, sensitivity when you talked about different types of meat, beef, etc. Forget it, because we are here for scientific discussion. Pork in Vietnam, that is a pig. She's a slaughterhouse worker. They do everything on the floor. You see, floor is dirty. Have a lot of feces. Shoe walking, etc. Of course, there are a lot of bacteria there when you do this kind of thing on the floor. Okay. And people like do it because that is tradition. For decades, for centuries, people just keep doing that. A big project from the World Bank, $150 million, I think. they install very fancy slaughterhouse in different provinces, hanging system like Europe and North America. It worked for 2 or 3 months, and it stopped because people don't like it. Because people have to bring pigs there, they pay some fee, they have to do, etc. It's new for them. They don't want to do it. It worked from the beginning when the project support you to do, but from the moment you need to pay something to use the service, they don't want to do it anymore. They come back to the basic. They do something like this. Okay, so we ask the question, now what is the solution? If you are from the rich country, the regulation is good. You start put on laws that you don't have to do it. You should not do that. If you do it, you have to pay a lot or you close a shop. But of course, you cannot, the society is not working like this in many low and middle income countries. You have all this law and regulation, but we don't really have a strong enforcement to apply this law. Okay, so solution, we talk with people, now you work on the floor. Why you thinking about systems that you still be able to do something like you are doing, but I ask you to put it on the metal grid, only 20 centimeters from the floor to separate the carcass from the floor, leading to reductions of micro-contamination. Okay, so we talk with them, we do focus group discussion, etc. Are you okay to do that? Yeah, they said, oh, it may be a good solution. So we produce this type of grid. That's in metal. If you have big money, you can do it in inox, but otherwise you can do on other things, even in bamboo or something like this. Okay, and from that people slaughter their pigs on this grid, and you have water to clean, and obviously it brings down the level of contamination. And here it shows, for example, look, pig slaughterhouse in Vietnam. The baseline, if you don't do anything, is about 6 CFU per square centimeters. After intervention, you have something 4.4 and 4.6, significantly different reduction in terms of bacteria contamination. So to invest this thing, of course, it's low cost. It's not very expensive. The community can pay upfront to do that. If they want to do, government want to help people, that can be a solution from the slaughterhouse level. How about the market? The market, usually, people put, in Vietnam, Cambodia is very typical, people put pork on the table, and they put a carton, a paper on the table, and they put pork on so that paper can absorb the water of the meat. But of course, if you have the wet papers like this for a long time, it's the opportunity for bacteria to grow and it's contaminate more. And for that, we do the same focus group discussion, etc. We said, okay, you need to change the floor as the surface of the table by plastic or whatever, the material that you can sweep and clean it easily. And actually we tested it, and we provide from the project. It's a project, you always have some money, right, to collect information, but also to offer some infrastructure. And we test some training, etc. And of course here you have the control shop and the trial shop, 60, 61. And in Cambodia, you can bring here the Salmonella prevalence from 53, you remember that I started the baseline about 50%, 45%, to 34% for the control. In Vietnam, it brings from 52% Salmonella prevalence to 24, 52 to 24. And how much we pay per shop? We invest about $25 to $30, by training people, providing the surface, providing a little bit of tissue, etc. And by training to change the practice and provision of cheap materials, we call the low cost and light touch, you can bring actually the level of contamination from 50 to 30, 50 to 20. Is this beautiful? No. It can work. But of course, that is from the study. It's from the pilot. And my boss, Delia Grace from the UK, she always says, pilot is always, pilot never fail, pilot always working. But pilots never scale. The important for us here is really to multiply or scale up all this intervention for many thousand pork shops in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, etc. And only when you do that, you can solve or reduce the problem of public health in this type of thing. 2 or 3 minutes left. Okay, I want to say that that is a small study. After this success of testing in small scale in Vietnam, in Cambodia, now we go to the medical research area. We want to apply the randomized controlled trial, the gold standard of intervention, to see if it works. And for the last few years, Actually, we run 6 major randomized control trials from Vietnam, from Ethiopia, from Uganda, from India, and also from Nigeria. And general trend we are showing is that actually the cost of implementation are low, about $35 for the market. If you ask the slaughterhouse, it's about $100. It's about around $100 actually, and it's for that intervention, it can improve gap knowledge, aptitude, practice of people, microbial contamination reduce, but also the business performance become better, and that is very important. But actually, we need to really adapt that to the specific context. Why women from Cambodia and Vietnam, they really like put the carton and paper on the table because they make pork rice, etc. So if you can hang it, it's maybe better. So it not need to be specific in the country, and the success is more in Vietnam, Cambodia. We didn't see much in Ethiopia at the moment, but we need to see that. Okay, this is one project, One Health project. It's very comprehensive. I mentioned that One Health is about human health, people, and the environment. The people is you talked about zoonotic disease, food safety, antimicrobial resistance, but very important that you look at the water, for food safety, for AMR, and you need to also to look at the economics governance issue. That's why you have $115 billion coming from here, and to see how it works in the very integrated project. So I led this project. It was closed last year, so-called One Health initiative. So here's I can skip. You can have this slide just to show you how the design was done in terms of control and experiments in different study. Here the photo just show you that the low cost intervention is about here. Very basic. If you talk about hygiene, you need to have water to wash your hand. Okay, so we provide small water tank or bucket, soap, etc. in the market so that they can do. Here is the training for people. Different discussion I mentioned. You need to engage people, and also we have some logo and the score. So people, if you are good, I give you 5 stars. If you are not, you are bad, you have 1 or 2 stars. And when the consumer come, if they check the number of stars, they know that, oh, you are better, I come to buy you more. So that is about incentive. If you improve the practice, people like you, you can sell more. So that's the incentive for you, incentive also for the consumer from both sides. So you can do better together. And for that, I have different results from different levels between control and experiments. Here in Africa, we did the same. Ethiopia, the shop look very different compared to Vietnam and so on. Yes, very poor condition. In Africa, we train people, we provide gumboot for slaughterhouse worker. Usually they don't have it. So it improves the hygiene and practice in different countries. Another design in slaughterhouse. Here we did in Western Kenya. We train people. People like it. Have a lot of poster. Very simple, but if efficient. And the training, one short training is not working. You need to repeat. You need to keep people knowing things. You have some result. And finally, I want to finish by saying that you train people, you achieve something, but at the end of the day, you need the policies. Okay? Some of these things linked to the public health. And some of the context people think too much about money. For many countries, you need to have some of these things go to use the public fund to do the job. If you hand over everything to people, it's not working. So that's why the policy important. We have African Union to develop food safety strategy for them. We also work with the country. For example, here, I was in Dhaka, one for food safety training. We work with the World Bank to develop report for Vietnam. We go to Cambodia to organize similar things for the working group and the Ministry of Health, Agriculture to work together. We document it. We publish paper. You can read this type of experiments. The whole story I'm talking today, you can read in different scientific paper we publish. We have university to develop the curriculum here in Africa. They have something like ASEAN. If someone graduate in one country, you can work to another country. So if you work with the regional education structure like IUCN, Inter-University Council for East Africa, here we develop the One Health and food safety. They train so they can improve the capacity people. We say that we train the next generation of people working on food safety. We have another report. I think that I can leave some for you about wildlife. Now that is also very interesting topics in many countries. I'm from Vietnam. You are from China. Many Vietnamese Chinese want to eat wild meat. Wild animals. Wild animals doesn't mean that you capture in forests, etc. We don't have many. We raise animals. We raise wild animals in the farm. And actually, there's a lot of pathogens and the risk of spillover from wild animal to people. That people don't realize it. We do study, and not many people are aware of that. So we publish a report. You can scan. You have the report to see the risk, the reward, and recommendation how to reduce. So the question here is not to ban everything. During COVID time, China banned completely the raise of wild animal. Now everything come back. Vietnam the same. So people seem to like it. So you need to help them to do in the safe way that you still satisfy personally people, population, but protect them from the health. And we need, that is the job. We published and launched it last year in South Africa. We document some of the working group between Vietnam and Ethiopia, the same intervention in Cambodia, and we did also some study on disease surveillance in live bird market, discussion with colleagues how to reduce the risk from the traditional and wet market, and so on. To finish, 4 years ago I was in Wuhan for the mission to study the origin of the virus. We didn't find the origin at the moment. We know that it's from zoonotic diseases, but concretely how it works, we don't know yet. This is still a big question for science to do. I hope that some of you will find the result for the world, and so on. So some of the information. Okay, key message to conclude, and Maria, you won't have time. Now, okay, traditional market, we talked a lot from the beginning. It doesn't look good, but it's important. Important for you, for me, for many people to have food to eat, but also to generate income for many people who sell food. Okay? Hazard is important. 50% of salmonella contamination is scary, but it doesn't really reflect things, the health impact. We need to move from hazards to risk. You need to do risk assessment to know how many people get sick, quantify financially how much it goes for the country. You need to come up with a solution. Very solution we call three-leg stool. It's three things: capacity building, providing low-cost technology, incentive for many sides, but also regulation and enabling environment. Policymakers have to fund it also for some of the good things we do. And finally, I just want to say that One Health approach is important, because that is actually an approach to bring different sectors to work together. For me, it's very simple. Sometimes people make complicated for the One Health, even at OLAB, etc. But the One Health is basically that is an approach to bring different sectors to work together. If you come together in good way, in partnership, you are not better than me, I'm not better than you. You need to consider the perspective of different people. And human, we are not good in that. Usually, we only consider that I'm better than you. And from the time you think that you are better than others don't like you, and you don't work together. So actually, in understanding, it's very important to work together in One Health. So that is, and One Health is about health of people, animal, and the ecosystem. If you talked about one single discipline, it's not about One Health. You need to integrate it. I hope that you have more people from environment, more people from animal science and animal health to work with medical people. And that is about One Health we need in academic, but also to implement it on the ground. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for the attention. It looks like that we don't have time for question or discussion, because
if you have questions, you can also contact him, right?
yeah. So I will share the slide for you, okay? So you can have some reference and things like this. And I wish you all the best. And I hope that you have some time to visit Shanghai. Not like me. I came to Shanghai, but I don't see anything outside, not very much. I will come back and I take 1 or 2 days to visit the town. So all the best, everyone. Thank you very much.